the CentreSteer podcast, a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners.
Welcome to the CentreSteer podcast number 133 for April 2024. CentreSteer is a monthly podcast for Land Rover enthusiasts, hobbyists, and owners around the world. For this podcast, we go halfway around and down to Australia. We talk to Geoff Lewis and Damon Heather of Seriously Series. Seriously Series follows Geoff and Damon's Land Rover adventures throughout Australia. They document their journeys, bush mechanics, and other Land Rover tips and tricks on their YouTube channel. This is also when I find out that saying Seriously Series, I have to stop and think about it because it runs together and I almost screw it up every time.
Yeah, you have to really enunciate this seriously. Otherwise, it's kind of like series.
Exactly. And that's Harold joining me this month. I'm John Costage, or whatever I am. And also...
You are the dude in charge, which is abbreviated DIC.
And along with Harold, joining us this month is Morgan. Welcome back, Morgan.
Thank you very much. And I was just thinking, you said halfway down and halfway around, but actually, Australia, portions of it are like directly through the center of the earth from the northeast of the U.S.
I was thinking a global.
So they might be.
I was thinking global, sir, like a globe.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking like straight there, because Land Rovers cannot tunnel yet.
Underneath.
They can't, but people have made Earth sandwiches between the U.S. and Australia. You
They
get
don't
two
sound all
people
that
on
tasty.
opposite sides of the globe, but they just drop a piece of bread on the ground.
I see.
But they do have to figure out the math to make sure they're directly across the planet.
I had a truck in my shop last year that came from the Canary Islands, and it was Alpine white, just like my truck was. And my truck came from Australia. So I'm thinking these two trucks spent their first 25 years like they couldn't have been any farther apart from each other and still both been on the same planet. And then they became united in my driveway at my shop.
Wow.
And our fellow podcast panelist, Dixon, who is, I don't know, he's MIA this month. We're not sure. He's supposed to join us. He's not here.
He's off doing something important somewhere for someone.
Yes. I'm thinking it might be a Placid Lassie thing since they're gearing up for D-Day this year. They're taking Placid Lassie across the Atlantic.
Oh, who are they invading?
Oh,
Newfoundland, I think. Maybe not. And thanks to our Patreon and Buy Me a Tea subscribers for their support. Patreon supporters receive bonus content, including 10 questions, our Land Rover-oriented question and answer lightning round, and also sometimes some occasional bonus content, stories and such. The odd tour of a shop, those also do happen. And our latest Buy Me a Tea from Bob Steele. And you may recall that last month we had Mike McKeag on, and Bob says, I first met Mike McKeag 28 years ago while I began my Land Rover journey 6 years prior. The occasion of my introduction to Mike, that's his phrasing there, Mike, his dear wife Nancy, wonderful children Sarah and Adam, at my first MAR in 1996 at their home, Penland Farm, set my course for the future and this disease that we all share. I am proud to say that Mike is the one who I hold most dear in our Land Rover community. Thank you for introducing your podcast listeners to the joyful delight of all the remarkable moments that Mike has touched us over the past 49 years. Who will join me at the 2025 MAR to celebrate 50 years of Rove? To celebrate the person I hold in the highest regard, I would like to suggest 28 brown waters are in order to commemorate each of the years I have been blessed to know Mike and his family. It just doesn't get any better than this. Thanks very much, Bob. Appreciate that. It was nicely said about Mike, too.
28 brown waters in one sitting sounds awfully hard on the liver.
Probably space those out. And now it's time for the North American events calendar with Dixon. Dixon is not here, so we are going to sit in for Dixon. And we'll start off with the ANARC Club calendar. As you already know, probably listeners, we have 3 ANARC events for 2024. They're all posted on the ANARC website. So you go out to anarc.club. And the 3 events, if you're not already familiar, is the Pacific Northwest Rally. That'll take place May 24th and 27th. And you can meet me. I will be at that event. The North Star Rover Rally is August 1st through the 4th in
Gilbert, Minnesota.
And in which case you'll get to meet Harold. Harold will be at that event.
If you can catch me, I will be there.
And there's a possible sighting of Morgan also at the North Star Rally.
That's true. I'm hoping to make it out there.
And then the Gulf Coast Rally is going, the GAR will take place October 24th to the 27th. Details are still being finalized for that. And I'm hoping that I can make that one also and see if we can get Harold to join me, and we'll head down to that one maybe.
Yeah, it might be fun to go down there, especially if they're giving out GAR badges.
And if you go out to ANARC.club, there's a list of other events that are going on. I'll just give you a quick recap from the calendar. Coming up in the first weekend of May is the Rovers Club Spring Robosonia Trials. And then also Croc has its Spring Uhari activity taking place May 9th through May 12th down in North Carolina. Or as I have just noticed on the website, it says Uhari, North Carolina. Someone please tell the website administrator for the ANARC calendar to go change that. Oh, wait, I just did because I told myself I have to go fix that.
John, you misspelled something? Imagine that.
Apparently it's auto-corrected to Caroline instead of Carolina. So if you are checking out the website and that has not been fixed, let me know.
No more editing the website while listening to Jimmy Buffett, please.
And the Northern Carolina Land Rover Club is having their annual Overland events Saturday, May 11th through May 19th. And then skipping ahead into June, the Northeast Land Rover Club is having their annual, or the annual, takes place at the Anthracite Outdoor Adventure Area. And we'll conclude with early July, Dork Rover Revival. That is the Defender Owners Rover Club in New Hampshire. They welcome all Land Rovers. They're having their inaugural Rover Revival event.
And I think they'll welcome people who aren't dorks.
Well, I think you become a dork automatically.
Okay.
Yes.
Automatic membership.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and that event will be taking place in Vermont.
Excellent.
So a little more central.
So that's a tad dorky as well. A New Hampshire club having an event in Vermont.
Right.
Also, one other event that is not taking place here in North America is the Billings Off-Road Show. That's over in the UK. That will take place June 29th and 30th. It's a weekend packed with 4x4 fun for all. I realize that's not a North American event, but it is a cool event. I have been to it in the past, and I wanted just to let folks know that's taking place.
There are those who will travel for such a thing.
And have.
And now, time for the news. First up, JLR has its best full year sales since 2021. Continuing strong demand for the Land Rover Defender pushed JLR's full year sales to their highest level since 2021. Retail sales increased 22% to 431,733 units for the financial year ending in March 31. You may recall the JLR has their fiscal year runs March to March. For that entire year, sales were up 22%. Sales of the Defender grew 53% to 114,000, pushing its share of JLR's total retail sales to more than a quarter. Defender sales were almost double the 66,000 sales of the Range Rover, the full-size Range Rover, the company's next best-selling model, whose volume rose to 34%. Then there's the Range Rover Sport. That was a third best-selling model. Sales were up 83% to almost 63,600. And then Jaguar was up. They say Jaguar brand. I have trouble saying that in my head, but here it is. The Jaguar brand's volume for the year was 66,866, which is up 6.9%, helped by demand of the F-Pace and E-Pace. And of course, as we know, Jag will become an electric-only brand in 2025. And JLR's sales focus on its more profitable models has come at the expense of its more affordable range. So full year sales for the Evoque, formerly its biggest selling vehicle, fell 14% down to 47,000. And the Disco Sport volume fell to fifth, down to 29,000 units. And the Velar sales were down 11% to 26,500 units. And concluding here on sales, China was JLR's biggest market over the 12 months, with sales up 14% to 104,000 units. China sales were overtaken by the UK and North America. JLR China sales for the quarter fell 8.9% to one under 23,000 units. UK sales were at 27,000 units. That's up 32%. North America was at 26,987 units. That was up 21%. And then globally, sales were up 11% for the quarter. So just to remind you there, for the entire year of 2023, sales were up 22%. They sold 431,733 units.
So if sales are down in China for JLR products, how is the knockoff Land Wind doing?
Considering they lost their court case, that's an even better question.
Are they selling more than JLR is at this point? Whoever's making the knockoffs these days?
Considering their whole economy is slowing a bit right now,
well, okay.
Doubt it.
Okay.
It's so rare for a business to actually lose their court case for copyright infringement in China. I have no idea how that affects the business.
No, they won that court case.
Land Rover did.
Land Rover won the court case, yes, which was a rare event for a non-Chinese company to win a copyright infringement.
Yeah, I think what Morgan is saying is he doesn't quite know how that affects the local company for them to lose against the non-Chinese company.
Right, Chery itself. Right. Yeah, because it was Chery that made the land win. They were the ones.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was Chery,
so
which they have the...
They were suing their partner.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, neat. That's fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then next, and this made the rounds all over Facebook and other places, I found this Car Scoops article to be a little more of a understanding of what was going on with the Consumer Reports came out with its cost to operate list. And this is entitled Tesla Cheapest Brand to Maintain, Battery Not Included, Land Rover Most Expensive. So maintenance and repair costs are frequently a critical consideration for prospective car buyers as they can significantly impact the ownership experience and, of course, their budget. In the latest annual survey conducted by Consumer Reports, members were asked to report their out-of-pocket expenses for total maintenance, that includes oil changes, tires, etc., and repairs over the previous 12 months, excluding costs associated with collision repair. Tesla emerged as the least expensive brand to maintain over a 10-year ownership period. However, it's important to note that this study doesn't appear to factor in the potential cost of battery replacement, which could significantly alter this assessment. Generally, American brands dominated the list of cheapest maintenance and repair costs, securing 4 of the top 5 spots. The study suggests that opting for a domestic automaker can be a wise financial decision. Conversely, Land Rover stood out as the most expensive brand to maintain, followed by, unsurprisingly, premium German automakers. And then there's a full list if you want to go check that out.
Land Rover is a high maintenance brand for low maintenance lifestyles.
That luxury and all the bells and whistles comes with a lot more complexity.
But that doesn't necessarily explain Ford, Buick, Toyota, Ford, Chevy. They're all technically sophisticated vehicles. Tesla's very technically sophisticated.
But the thing is, I think, number one, the parts are cheaper. And number two, I think that the repair procedures are less labor intensive.
And I suspect it also has to do with volume. If you're low volume manufacturer, the price of your parts are going to be generally expensive.
That's why the parts are cheaper, because they make cajillions of them.
Right. Kind of explains why all the American ones are cheaper.
With the exception of all the Ford parts that used to go into Jags and Land Rovers, they got marked up once you put the oval on them.
That's true. Exactly.
All those green stickers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good to see Tesla at the top, despite everything else. Electrics should require less maintenance. There should be far fewer in the area of,
with the exception of that whopping bill at 8 to 10 years when you need a new battery.
Now, I'm curious whether they ask, and they probably don't, since they didn't ask for battery replacements, right? They probably don't ask for fuel costs, because what's 8 to 10 years of fuel costs for a Land Rover as well?
Oh, yeah. You're careful asking that question.
That's what it comes down to with an electric, is that you have less of the moving parts and fluids and stuff like that to maintain. And you are putting electricity in, but they're much more efficient on the fuel, on that electricity you put in. And
depending on how you get your
the battery is, yes, exactly. But yeah, the battery is part of that fuel process that you compare over the period. And usually if you add up the battery price and the electricity costs, it's still a lot less than the fuel costs over that lifetime. At least it better be, otherwise
Depending on how
it's
much
not
you
a
use
really
it.
good deal.
Because the thing is, you don't drive much every day, you're better off with the internal combustion engine. You're buying less fuel, but at the end of 10 years, you still have the same thing. You don't have to buy a new engine or a new fuel tank that's $10,000. Whereas the battery doesn't care whether you're using it or not. In fact, using it less probably shortens its life.
At this point, the charging technology is pretty good, but yes, there is still that shelf life. But a hard worked battery will certainly last a lot shorter lifespan than a low worked battery, especially with the lithium ion and the smart chargings and all of that.
Assuming you're keeping it shoreline when you're not using it.
You raised, though, a good point, Morgan. They don't mention anything here about fuel usage, and that's not factored in. But they do, I like how they do call out battery replacement, which is effectively the fuel for the EV when you're not factoring in, if especially the Land Rover getting maybe 10, 15 miles per gallon, what's that cost over the 10 years?
Right. I guess something like a catalytic converter is probably included in those maintenance costs. That's another portion of the fuel system in an ICE vehicle that's capturing some of the output.
If this is a shock to you, then I'm not sure why you've been listening to this podcast, because we've known this, and
you might be in the wrong place.
You're certainly welcome to continue to listen. We welcome you. Please do. But yeah, if you're worried about the cost of everyday activities and your reliability, and when it comes to the cost side of it,
you have to ask and worry about the cost of owning a Land Rover, then you're really not a Land Rover person. If you have to ask, you can't afford it.
But it also has the other portion of it is that Land Rover has been making mechanics of Land Rover owners for a very long time now.
76 years.
One way you can reduce
Tuesday.
That cost. Yes.
Of course, the other part of as of Tuesday, which is World Land Rover Day, I'm still spicy about them ignoring 75 years of history and ignoring World Land Rover Day.
But I imagine they'll ignore 76 just as efficiently as they ignored 75.
I think you are absolutely correct, sir. We are moving on up to the luxury vehicle that they are.
They may actually get more effective at ignoring it every coming year.
It's interesting you say that, but at the same time, I hear rumblings of them potentially coming out and appealing to the classic Land Rover owner. This coming from JLR Corporate, and we'll see if that happens and what that means exactly. And moving on, JLR Automotive gets grant for control system for displaying vehicle trajectory to occupant. This is a patent that they received. JLR Automotive has patented a control system for assisting vehicle occupants by displaying a composite image sequence with a trajectory indicator showing the vehicle's predicted path. The indicator moves relative to the environment, giving occupants a visual representation of the vehicle's movement. That's pretty much all there. There's some more detail about this, but that's basically the details of that patent, which I thought was interesting. But it sounds to me like, aren't they already doing this? And why do you need a patent for it? But
they're doing it for the backup cameras, but they may not be doing it for forward vision. So it may be a new thing there. But
I see.
Tell you what, the first time I read through this, I got a couple words mixed up, and I saw there was a control system for ejecting vehicle occupants by displaying the trajectory indicator.
That would be for the new Aston Martins.
Or maybe the Bond Edition 110.
Oh, that could be that's right, for the Defender Bond Edition. There we go. Yes,
exactly.
That roof gets at one-time use. Explosive bolts. Why exactly they need a patent for this, but fair enough. They already have that on the newer ones. They have a vehicle display, and you can look all around the vehicle because they got all the cameras in there. But I guess projecting where the vehicle is going to go, they needed a patent for it. Not really sure why.
I mean, I can do a pretty good job of that just by holding onto the steering wheel and looking out the windscreen, but I've been doing this driving thing for a while, so.
Yeah, I don't want you looking, if you're driving and you're looking at the screen where you're going, I don't think I like that.
You may as well have on a blindfold and have Scottish Bob yelling in your ear what to do.
That's right. Yes. Maybe there's an application if you're going off road and you're going very slow, and then maybe that's going to predict where your path is going to go. But
Yeah, it's not clear what the use case would be, but as a virtual spotter, it might be okay.
I imagine that I should go and read the patent, but it's probably something akin to the reverse cameras where it adjusts your general direction. But with the modern Land Rovers, and this is something especially used in the Range Rovers and the Range Rover Sports and stuff like that, they have torque vectoring brake systems. So there's actually a fair amount more that the onboard computing and drivetrain calculates on the fly that does actually change the handling and the direction that the vehicle will turn.
Right, but
the standard driver
vectoring,
might know.
those torque vectoring brakes are at speed sort of thing. Do you have time once that system kicks in to look down at your screen and see where you're headed?
A lot of the vehicles are now coming out with heads-up displays. I don't think Land Rover has done that yet, but
yeah, they have,
a lot
I think,
of
a
the
limited
more
number of
driver-centric vehicles.
I think there's a limited
In
number
my
of heads
opinion,
up.
if you're going fast enough for the brakes to be vectoring your torque, I think you're in trouble. So you need to really be paying attention to what you're doing and not looking at doodads.
Oh, I agree. And it feels very much like the sort of vector lines that a lot of the racing simulations will put in overlaid
Right.
in the game. And we don't really want drivers to just be following a vector line as they're whipping around some roads with unknown conditions. And
Right. That's
Yeah.
great in a simulator where if you crash, you just put another quarter in and keep on going. You don't actually die.
right. But I guess if the system is already sort of calculating that sort of information for various functionalities, could be handy to display it somewhere.
Like I said, I think it might be useful on a trail, but I'm not sure on the road what utility it would really serve.
So it can show you that you're sliding sideways down and much to
can't
accelerate
tell
to
on your
avoid some
own.
trees. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to JLR could use EV platform from Chery's Exeed brand. This is from Car Scoops. JLR may use one of Chery's platforms to underpin future electric vehicles as part of the British brand's move to electrification. Chinese media reports that JLR will use hybrid and battery electric platforms introduced by Chery's Exeed brand. Leveraging technology from Chery will allow JLR to speed up development and launches of future electric vehicles. Reports that Jaguar will be the first brand to use Exeed's battery electric platform and could unveil its first model based on this platform in the second half of 2024. While a Chery spokesperson denied that a deal has been inked with JLR, the Chinese automaker's chairman has said 2 luxury European brands want to use its platform without specifying which brands they are. JLR and Chery have deep ties to China and have operated a 50-50 joint venture since 2012. They produce models including the Evoque, the Disco Sport, and the Jaguar XFL, which for if you're not in America, XFL is also a football league here in the U.S.
Which lasted, 6 weeks, twice?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it might be back again. I don't know. Yeah, that seems like maybe a potentially smart move to use their platform to help ramp up their electrification efforts.
If somebody's already making something and it's an off-the-shelf component, if it's proven, then it's going to save you a ton on both in money and time for development.
It's especially if you've just scrapped all of your current vehicle plans for like Jaguar.
And it's generally considered that the Chinese are ahead on EV technology and vehicles. It's possible that might be another reason to do that if they're further ahead.
All the parts are made there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is all the manufacturing is there. Certainly there's some knowledge outside, but the ability to iterate and quickly.
Especially if you're far behind already.
Right.
And you're a small niche manufacturer.
And you made this big thing about ditching all of your production and going all electric. And then you've I guess we should develop some products.
And then you had some financial difficulties for a couple of years while you should have been investing in that said electrification.
And let the brand languish during that period as well.
Shh, quiet you. Next up, Range Rover Sport SV braking performance sets new standards. This is a press release from Land Rover. Range Rover's modern luxury performance flagship, the 635 PS mild hybrid twin turbo V8 Range Rover Sport SV, recently proved the stopping performance and durability benefits of its optional carbon ceramic braking system by completing a 2-week track event on a single set of brakes, discs, and pads. All 4 of the Range Rover Sport SV Edition 1s, that's all in capitals, I guess it's a special model, used one track at the undulating 2.9 mile, 4.6 kilometer Portimao Grand Prix circuit in Portugal, featured on optional carbon ceramic braking with the SV exclusive Brembo Optimi calipers and 440 millimeter front disc brakes, the largest in the automotive industry. On average, each car covered 215 laps of the 15-corner circuit, adding 615 miles to the 1,000 miles they had already covered before the event started. When inspected after the drive event, the brake pads for the carbon ceramic braking system still retained around 30% of the usable pad life. The unique Brembo front calipers, the largest ever fitted to a Range Rover, are the biggest contributor to this exceptional wear performance. Developed exclusively for the Range Rover Sport SV, the world-first caliper design features 8 pistons arranged in a cross shape to give improved pressure distribution, more uniform pad wear, and maximize braking efficiency.
Can't imagine what that's going to cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not in the press release, by the way.
Yeah, the 2 expensive words there, carbon and ceramic.
And it's already on the Range Rover Sport SV Edition 1. So that tells you even more that it's Edition
1, as in there's one person on the planet who can afford this. And the fact that it's made by Brembo, it's already going to be expensive. Brembo makes some cool stuff, but none of it's cheap.
No, and I would imagine that this is heavily adapted from their racing developments.
Yeah.
Bowler stuff, maybe?
Because Brembo makes a lot of racing stuff. I think is what Morgan is saying.
Yeah. And truthfully, the Range Rover is such a unique vehicle that it is a big, large vehicle that people want and do drive like it's a race car. Yeah.
Even though they shouldn't.
Don't take it out on Nürburgring. All right, next up, the 2025 Range Rover Sport adds blacked out stealth pack. Following last year's major updates, the 2025 Range Rover Sport keeps things simple with the addition of a new body kit dubbed Stealth Pack. As the name suggests, the trim package adds a stealthy blacked out treatment to the handsome midsize SUV, including Carpathian gray satin paint for the exterior in combination with a gloss black finish on items like the grille, standard 23-inch wheels, brake calipers, and even the traditionally green Land Rover badge. The pack also includes the first factory protective film for the Sport. The film lends the vehicle a matte-like finish and can be removed should the owner desire. For the interior, buyers will be able to choose between dark and light shades of leather trim. In the U.S., the Stealth Pack carries a price tag of $10,305 and is available initially on the P400 Dynamic SE grade. A flagship SV grade was also added for 2024. Available in limited numbers, the SV packs the BMW Source twin-turbo 4.4-liter V8 with 626 horsepower on tap. The SV will hustle to 60 in only 3.6 seconds. Now you know why they need those extra brakes.
Yeah.
I don't see anything stealthy.
I think it's just all blacked out.
More like the Darth Vader edition.
Yeah. They should make the front accent lights should be in black.
And once they break, they'll be dark.
Ah, there we go. There we go.
Yeah. Blacking out vehicles is a popular thing. And actually, truthfully, for a vehicle like that, $10,000 is not particularly expensive.
No, it's not.
For a custom blacking out and with that protective film. In some ways, it's good to see them catering to people who want that because they just haven't traditionally had an option for that.
And next, another special edition Range Rover. This is the SV BURFORD edition, an exclusive curation inspired by the Cotswolds. This is a press release from Land Rover. The new Range Rover SV BURFORD edition embodies this principle. Limited run of 10 special vehicles inspired by the Cotswolds has design cues from the calm and beautiful British countryside, offers superior driver and passenger comfort, and delivers elevated character. whether on sweeping country roads or in the heart of the city. Incorporating a bespoke color palette inspired by England's largest area of outstanding natural beauty, the Burford edition is also thoroughly modern and reductive.
There's one of those design words again.
I just get the feeling like they pass this by Jerry, and Jerry's like, hey, you got to put reductive in there. Continuing on, Burford, from where this limited edition model takes its name, is known as the gateway to the Cotswolds and is synonymous with luxury rural lifestyle. Created from the Range Rover SVP 615 V8 long wheelbase, the Burford edition exterior features bespoke details including ether gray body color with satin finish and distinctive metal script badging.
Is ether gray just supposed to be a fancy way of saying like the mist and the fog?
I think of just saying gray. Continuing on, every month it seems they're having some special limited edition Land Rover. This is the next one, a Range Rover, only available in the UK. There's 10 of them.
Which means next month they'll have a version only available in the US that'll be red, white, and blue with slot mags, and they'll call it the Buford edition.
Sounds like an episode of Top Gear.
And you will find that if you run it in reverse, no, the odometer does not go backwards.
It's the RS edition. Next up, this was making all the rounds also this past month in Land Rover world. This is the groundbreaking new Defender OCTA, will be revealed on July 3rd. And apparently it's going to be exclusive client preview events. There were a number of different articles that came out, but I'm reading from the press release because this made sense to go right to the source material, because all they did was release a 1 minute, 2 second video and some pictures, and that's all they did. So the new Defender OCTA, and that's all in capitals, OCTA, the high-performance all-terrain hero from the original British adventure brand, Defender, will be revealed on 3 July 2024 following a series of exclusive client preview events and the completion of its exhaustive testing and development program. Ahead of the global reveal, prospective clients for the first year's Defender OCTA allocation are invited to register for one of 7 exclusive Defender Elements events in private locations around the world, from the UK, Germany, and Italy in Europe to the United States, Dubai, and Japan. The V8 twin-turbo mild hybrid petrol Defender OCTA will offer an unparalleled breadth of capability, comfort, and composure, whether on-road or off-road. As a result, it has been subjected to the most extreme testing and development program in Defender history. The official testing and development program, film released today, showcases the range of locations and punishing terrains visited by Defender OCTA engineers over the past 3 years to prove it lives up to its billing as the toughest and most durable model in the unstoppable Defender family. I emphasized unstoppable. Final paragraph. Defender OCTA engineers have concluded more than 13,960 additional tests on top of the standard Defender testing regime, spanning high performance handling and durability at Germany's Nürburgring, wet asphalt at Latix in France, ice in Sweden, arduous rally raid stages and lasters in France, sand deserts in Dubai, plus Moab rock crawls in Utah. Defender OCTA has also conquered every extreme trail at JLR's legendary Esner test facility in the UK. That video they released is all about that testing regime they did. It's 1 minute, 2 seconds.
I wonder if any of the 13,000 additional tests involved, say, lighting it on fire or placing it on top of a high rise that's being demolished,
or letting the sea come in and during high tide.
Yeah, for instance.
Yes. There's one of the pictures they show from Moab. Looks like it was taken by new friend of the show, Nick Dimbleby, because he posted on his personal account on Instagram the picture of it up on top of the world there.
I wonder if he was involved with the video production.
Probably. I would suspect he was.
It seems to be up his alley. I like the development camo they used for that.
Yeah.
I do.
It does look good with the black and the black roof. Yeah. Is this part of the Defender family? Is this going to be part of the family now that they're going to have Defender OCTA is like maybe this top of the range?
I don't know. I'm still struggling with the verbiage about Defender being the original British adventure brand. Thinking originally it wasn't known as Defender, folks.
Yeah.
You'll notice, by the way, they didn't come out with revealing, and they could have, the OCTA on, I don't know, April 30th, World Land Rover Day, something you could have done. But no, you're going to wait till July 3rd instead.
Or they could have just waited 5 days to release this article announcing that it'll be revealed, and they could have at least made the announcement on the 30th.
But no, they probably wanted to time this with the announcement that they were discontinuing the Land Rover brand.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's exactly what happened 1 year ago. Yes.
Yes.
Land Rover's going away. We're going to empty all the stores of all our Land Rover branded merchandise.
We'll give it to all these schmucks in the U.S. that are putting on some sort of special event. We'll just get rid of all our swag, give it to them.
Coming soon, the OCTA. I suspect it's going to be north of 6 figures on the price. That's just my offhand.
Yeah, I'm not even going to ask because I know I can't afford it.
Yeah, exactly. And next up, there's a Destination Defender event that's taking place in South Korea. I found an article that talks about it. And of course, it's all in the translation, but there's only a couple sentences here I want to read to you because the rest of it is your normal about Land Rover and Defender models. But this says JLR Korea will hold a Destination Defender event where you can enjoy adventures as a Defender, probably a little translation issue there, until the 14th. I suspect that means it was taking place here during the month of April. And then prior to this, they had an online and off-road experience event that was held for the media taking place last month. So I assume that was in March of 2024. Just nice to acknowledge also that there's other Defender events going on around the world, Korea having its own Destination Defender event.
We should point out that this event is in South Korea, where it lasts for the month, not North Korea, where it would be for the rest of your life if you drove your Defender in there.
One of the photos they show, it was nice to see they had a classic Defender listed as shown in the photos they have of their Destination Defender event, just like they did here in the U.S.
What is that, an antelope on top of?
Yeah,
said
I think you're
Defender?
right. I think that is it. It does.
It's from one of their ads towards the end of the run. South Korea has a very interesting micro camper overland community. So it's nice to see that Land Rover is quite accessible there, or at least trying to be.
And I haven't seen any other Destination Defender events taking place outside of the U.S. or Korea now. There's nothing in Australia. I haven't heard of any going on in Europe. I wonder if they'll be doing those.
Yeah.
And finally, speaking of Defenders, Land Rover Defender 110 is a classic, becomes world's first EV SUV retro to use in-wheel motors. So technically speaking, it is a lot easier, at least in terms of complexity of work performed, to replace a vehicle's powertrain with one that runs on electricity. And that's one of the main reasons why European garages go down this path. The other is that the locals seem more than happy to drive around in a classic at the same time as the electric Rolls-Royce, Porsches, or Jaguars. Most of these projects go down the path of such a conversion. They have the engine and transmission taken out and then replaced by battery pack and motors that drive the axles. To date, as far as we know, and this is autoevolution.com, no such retrofitted vehicles didn't go in for in-wheel electric motors. I had to read that sentence several times. It actually says, there's 2 double negatives in there. No such retrofitted vehicle didn't go in for in-wheel electric motors. Enter the Land Rover Defender, put together by a British company called Pateon, and the exception to the motor on the axle rule. Pateon decided to expand the scope of its business by entering the EV retrofit game. With this in mind, it recently announced the launch of a program called Reborn Electric Icons. The program had to start somewhere and did this week with the first vehicle in the Reborn Electric Icons, a Land Rover Defender 110 of an unspecified model year that has converted to run on electricity. In launching this model, Pateon says it has become the first company in the world to offer an electric retrofit package for classic cars using in-wheel motors, unquote. On the surface, the Defender is the same one it originally was, and so it is at a slightly deeper level, meaning the curb weight and driving dynamics. Its inner hardware, on the other hand, has been completely replaced. The Defender is now fully equipped for an electric drivetrain that comprises a 75 kilowatt battery pack and electric motors inside each of the 4 wheels to give the vehicle the same abilities it had before. The battery pack, despite its size, is only large enough to ensure a maximum driving range of 153 miles. Granted, that's not much compared to what other EVs are capable of, but probably more than enough for what the Defender owners expects. I'm not sure I agree with that statement. The battery needs 12 hours to recharge when using a 7 kilowatt AC charger, or just 90 minutes when the optional 50 kilowatt DC one is used. The electric motors driving each of the wheels are good for a combined 483 horsepower. Torque levels have not been disclosed. Pateon did not say why the Land Rover Defender was made for, nor how much it cost to put together. So that looks interesting.
Hub motors are the thing of the future in electric vehicles. It's interesting, though, that picture shows there's still differentials underneath. So it looks like they're still using the axle case.
That's what, yeah, I see a differential there.
Yeah.
Differential there, yeah.
I guess they're just literally taking the ends off the axle case and mounting their drive motors on the end of it, which is cool. But it seems to me you could also get rid of the diff in the center and get some better ground clearance.
Although I wonder if they're actually running power and control through the housings.
Okay.
Because that might be a nice way to keep
it's already protected.
All the power protected.
Okay.
I never really thought of that until.
Just seems to me from a ground clearance standpoint, you'd want to get rid of the pumpkin, but yeah, you could use it as a conduit, definitely.
They mentioned it's an unspecified year, but it looks pretty clear here that it's post 2009 because there's no window vents. No.
Yeah, and yet there's a pre-Puma hood on it, so
good point.
A mishmash of different eras on there.
It could just be unnamed because it's such a mishmash of so many eras and the firewall may have been replaced.
Yeah, it's true. Good point. As they say, welcome to Land Rover ownership.
Yeah, it's not like American muscle cars. You can't just look at the taillights and know what year it is.
It would be interesting to play with this and see what sort of weighting levels it has and if any, and stuff like that. But even going back as far as a series, hub motors would be a great solution for them at this point. Want to upgrade to an entirely different braking solution and all of that, and just dropping it all in the hub is great.
So
and you
regenerative drum brakes,
which probably actually work better when they're wet.
Yeah, probably.
So by putting the motors in the wheels, that completely gets rid of all the transmission? Is that right?
That's yeah.
Okay, I'm just being clear on this. And then so that what's the whine going to be like? There's going to be a whine in the motors, but not as bad.
Like electric motors. No, you'll still have the motors will still make the noise, but you won't have the gears in between.
Right. And then so you basically you might just hear the road noise on the tires more than anything.
It depends on the motors, because the motors still make electric motor whiny noise, and you'll have 4 of them, not just one big one. You'll have 4 little ones, but you just won't have the gears in between making gear noise.
And it might be interesting to find out if you can selectively turn them on. Could you only have, if you're doing highway, maybe you only need 2, and then that could probably save you on electric
I
battery.
don't know, because you could power 2 of them, or you could power all 4, but half as much.
Oh, that's another thought. Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know if you really save anything or not, kilowatt wise.
Presumably, if you weren't powering one set of wheels, say your front wheels or something on the highway, they would probably still function for regen, for braking and such. That's the area where it will get really interesting as hub motors become more popular or more achievable in a wide range of vehicles, to see what you can really do with them.
It opens the avenue to the torque vectoring we were talking about earlier.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, wow.
In both directions, positive and negative.
Because a lot of that torque vectoring right now is implemented by applying the brakes at speed when the driver is not applying the brakes. So they don't actually have to
it's all negative
apply brakes. Yeah, there's a lot there. And in terms of efficiency, you also remove the resistance of the gears, but also the energy required to spin up gears and axles and
rotating inertia
speed and all that. Yeah. And especially with a Land Rover, there's a lot of weight in there.
As it seems with computers and anything electric these days, it is a rapidly maturing technology. And this is a very interesting development. See how this pans out.
Definitely.
All right, that's the news for April 2024. And now on the CentreSteer podcast, joining us from halfway around the world, Southern Hemisphere, we're once again talking Australians. We have Damon Heather, who's in Tasmania, and Geoff Lewis, who's in Western Australia. And both of you are the Seriously Series podcast / YouTube channel. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us, John.
Yes, thank you.
It's wonderful. This is great. I'm glad we're getting to connect and meet other Land Rover owners and enthusiasts halfway around the world, Southern Hemisphere. This is fantastic. I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us today.
Absolutely.
So you have a YouTube channel that's called Seriously Series, which I've now realized when I say it out loud, trips up my tongue. That's on YouTube and Pateon. and you guys have Land Rovers. You take journeys throughout Australia. There's bush mechanics and adventure documentaries, tips and tricks as you're traveling throughout Australia. Today, I watched a number of your videos, including Road to Ruin, Edge of the Earth, and Western Australia. Fantastic stuff. Thanks for what you're doing for the community and showcasing Australia in a Land Rover. Geoff or Damon, whoever wants to go first, how did you become a Land Rover geek, nerd, or bleed green? What do you got? How do you guys call it in Australia if you're a Land Rover enthusiast?
In Tasmania, in our kind of small knit groups, like we actually call ourselves Land Rover nuts or Land Rover nutters. Another term.
Fair. That's fair.
Just something different, but yeah, all of the above you said is what we generally call devoted Land Rover enthusiasts as well. Plus, there's probably heaps of other little Australian slang names that I can't think of right now, but the way I got into Land Rovers initially was the family had a 1998 Discovery 1, had the V8 variant, and it started from there, and then we actually eventually it became part of the farm and we didn't use it as much, and then I ended up joining the Defence Force, Australian Army, and we had the Land Rover Parentis at that stage.
Very exciting.
So yeah, so they were...
Did you drive Parentis in the Army?
I didn't. I was infantry, but we always got carried around in them in the back. I didn't It's funny, like when you in Australian Defence, you have to have a special license to drive each vehicle, and you have to do a course to drive that particular vehicle, which I thought was funny because at the time I owned a Land Rover 110 Defender, and I thought I knew how to drive them, but you need to learn how to do all the tactical kind of driving and everything. So I didn't actually end up doing that course. But I was happy to get picked up from after a long hike or something and get thrown in the back. And yeah, they're just absolutely robust vehicle.
Those of our listeners who are maybe not familiar with Parente, we have talked about them before, but if I remember correctly, it's basically a Defender 110 that's widened, and widened in the middle, or widened period, and then lengthened a little bit. Is that correct?
Yeah, so they're still the same wheelbase. As far as I understand, the chassis was quite custom compared to a Defender 110. They were galvanized. They had extra ladders, horizontal ladders, just construction and being more robust and for what they were being used for. There was the 6x6 variant, which was widened, as you say. They are quite wide, and they have a kind of a lot bigger windscreen as well, obviously being widened, but they look quite different from the 110 variant, which was the most common out of Parentis. But they were used for ambulance, they were used for cargo, they were used for personnel travel, and there was just heaps of kind of quirky ones as well. Like there was the Norforce Defender Parenti 110. That was for like more long range kind of travel. So they'll be going out into the like northern regions of Australia and actually patrolling in these vehicles. So they had extra fuel tank, they had split rims, and they just had a bigger capacity for everything to go out for that extended period of time. Quite an interesting variant of Land Rover altogether, the Parenti. Quite historic.
So there's two versions then. There's the kind of Parente 110, kind of normal 110, and then there's also the 6x6, which I think is the widened.
Yeah, widened and longer.
And longer, okay.
Yeah, so the 6x6 variant, John, that can actually carry up to a 4.5 ton payload on the back.
Wow.
As Damon said, they were designed to be, you had a workshop variant, you had an ambulance variant, and then you had a transport variant. And that was designed to take the big diesel gen sets out and for the major camps out bush and that too. And then you could also put behind them a dual axle independent suspension trailer also. And the 6x6 variant, they've actually got leaf springs in the back. They're not actually coil sprung all round like the 110 Parentis are. So there's all these little quirks which just keep us intrigued. It's the joys of owning a Land Rover.
And to get ahead of ourselves just a tad, The Parente that you have in your videos, is that a normal 110 or is that the 6x6 variant?
So that is a 110 variant, but like any Land Rover, it's not what you see is what you get. I bought that 9 years ago now, and that started off life because when you buy them, John, it's really cool. You actually usually get a logbook. And when you get the logbook, it has all the units that it's served with. It had all the different nuts and bolts that have been replaced in gearboxes and transmissions. And that started off as a GS, which is a general service vehicle. And that spent quite a bit of time in the SAS, where it got driven very hard. And then it got shipped over to the other side of the country, over from Western Australia to New South Wales. And then it was fitted out to be a radio vehicle, so an FFR fitted for radio. And so it spent a number of years as a radio comms vehicle, and then it ended up going back into a GS role in logistics and supply. But that's the vehicle we use, and we've reinstated all the 24-volt system that's in it, and that now charges two 12-volt deep cycle batteries in series, which gives us 24 volts, and that charges all our camera gear on the big jobs.
Nice. I have a Series 3 109 that is a former FFR vehicle. It was in the British Territorial Army, the 101st, I think. I remember, I used to know this off the top of my head, but it was in the British Territorials, and it was an FFR. It was a 109 XMOD FFR. It's still somewhat still 24 volt, but just for making it a little easier, it's some of it still has been switched back to 12 volt.
And is that the 2.6 litre 6-cylinder or the 2.25 litre?
It was 2.25 petrol, and then that engine was swapped out for a 200 naturally aspirated diesel.
Oof.
So,
that'd move along nicely.
It does, but last year it went through, the frame finally gave out. So there's a new galvanized frame under it. That happened last year. And yes, it drives much nicer now than it did in the past. It is, I don't drive it nearly enough, but it's very nice. It's very nice. The problem we have here in North America, I keep trying to tell people, because it's a right-hand drive, as my Defender also was right-hand drive. We will get back to you guys in just a moment. This is a me thing.
Yeah, this is important.
This is very important. And there was this Facebook discussion, I think it was on Facebook, could have been Reddit, where people were saying, should I buy a right-hand drive truck? And you can buy a right-hand drive truck. It's not the problem. The problem here in North America is that no one else knows that it's a right-hand drive truck, and no one else knows that it's a stick. And it's all the people driving around you that are not paying attention.
Yeah.
That's the important part I had to interrupt our podcast to say.
Oh, no, it's very important, John. And there's some wise words that were mentioned by a good friend of mine and long-term Land Rover owner. And he always said the fastest car's always first.
Yes.
So you think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Very true. Very true. And you have to command the road. They move around you. You don't move around them.
I call
Hold
that
your ground.
I have another acronym for that, and that's FF. Focus forward. That's mine.
Yeah, I like that. We might have to use that.
I was like, FF, I'm driving. Focus forward. Whatever's happening forward, by behind you. I did add to my Defender 110, they have these bulbs now. They're LED, and they will flash 5 times. And so I put that in the center brake light. So the two side ones are normal. They come on normal. But when you hit the brake, then the center one will flash 5 times. And I've had a couple people comment how that's a good improvement, because then it makes it a little easier to notice that it's on even in the daytime, that your brakes are on, because those lights can be real small, especially here in North America. And of course, people not paying attention. I go back to that original point. All right, Geoff, let's get back on track here, sir. How did you become a Land Rover nut, if I can use some Australian slang?
Oh, definitely. It's lovely to be put in that box. So how did I become a Land Rover nut? I actually finished school, came out of school, and at the age of 18, you realise that you would like to have a new car. But then you look at your bank account and you realise there's no way I can afford a new car. So you go, maybe I just build one. How hard can it be? I decided that I would buy a old 4-wheel drive and do it up. And at the time, and this might shock some of the listeners here, I was considering buying a World War II era Willys Jeep.
Oh, very nice. No, that's not shocking. That is not shocking at all, sir.
Oh, good. Well,
I have to interrupt
yet, John.
I have to interrupt the podcast yet again to tell you another thing. I'm sorry. I apologize for doing this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my
This
listeners
is great.
are
Enhancing it.
It's enhancing. They already know this, but I'm making you aware that the Jeep got its start north of Pittsburgh in Butler, Pennsylvania. That is where the original Jeeps were created, in Butler, Pennsylvania.
That's right.
And they were the Willys Jeeps, right? That's the Willys ones, the first ones, I believe. Or was that Bantam? No, they were Bantams. There we go. I got to get the right Jeeps. They were Bantam Jeeps. And they still, to this day, have a Bantam Jeep Festival an hour north of Pittsburgh. So there's another Land Rover connection for you for Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh, that's where they had the originally started the Bantam Jeeps were started there. But also Pittsburgh is named after a British prime minister.
There you go. Look, there's just more reasons to go to Pittsburgh now.
Absolutely.
John,
yes.
We're going to have to make our way over there. Stock up with oil and parts, and
you're invited. I've had Land Rover travelers, a family from South Africa stay at my house. I've had a couple from Austria stay at my house.
Fantastic.
But please, let's get back to you, sir, and tell us about you. So you were thinking of buying a Willys Jeep.
Yes, and basically in those days, not all that long ago, you would look in the classifieds, and I realised very quickly for a very sad-looking Willys Jeep, it was about $6,000 Australian, and I was earning $300 a week for doing odd jobs. So you don't have to be a mathematician to figure out that's going to take quite a while to save up. And then through a friend of, I guess, the family, there was a 1961 Land Rover Series 2, and the fellow wanted $400 for it. So I thought, $400, earning $300 a week, that's a bit more doable. So anyway, I went down and I met this wonderful fella, George, and we went for a little putt around the paddock in his Series 2 Land Rover, which he'd owned for 27 years, and he'd gone on most of the tracks in Tassie in it. He'd done off-road rallying in it. Mechanically, it was in good nick. The body was pretty tired. The wiring was a bit average, but I thought, I know nothing about these vehicles. It can't be that hard. And that's when I purchased it and started my Land Rover apprenticeship, which I'm still doing, because you never stop learning. And over the consequent next 3 to 4 years, I probably rebuilt the vehicle 3 times, because you never get it right the first time. It's always the third time. And as I started working on the vehicle and also having a bit of a fascination in engineering too, I just fell in love with them. The brilliant engineering of the Whitworth bolt, how that's much better than a UNC, because it's got a curved pitch on the thread, so therefore there's more surface area. So it can actually take a higher torque load. Just things like that. The fact that you can only, back in 1961, you could only get it in 5 different colours, and that was all green, because it was different tints of the green that was left over from the Second World War. I just absolutely loved them. And then finding out what they actually did here in Australia, and some of the trips and the expeditions, and then in Africa and America and all the rest, it just, I guess, resonated with me, because I've always, like Damon, had an interest in nature and exploring. And I just thought it's just the perfect vehicle to do all that in.
Have you named your 61 Series 2?
I did, but I called it Lara the Landy. I thought was quite good. But they don't all have names, but they just have a special place in my heart, John. I said to my wife, we can sell the house, we can sell the furniture, we can sell all the other Land Rovers, but we will never sell that one. That's not going anywhere.
You are in a safe place, as they say. Everyone listening to the podcast completely understands that, especially falling in love with a Land Rover and saying that is the last thing that will depart your hands.
That's it. And I'm even safer here in Western Australia, because everyone drives Land Cruisers. So they'll steal a Land Cruiser over a Land Rover any day of the week. So it's nice.
Nice. Damon, did you name your Land Rover? Is that a thing in Australia to name vehicles?
I haven't named any of mine.
Yeah.
I usually refer to their colour as their name. So if it's yellow, I'll call it the yellow Land Rover.
Right.
If I'm going somewhere, I'll tell my wife, I'm just going to go see our mate George. I'm going to take the yellow Land Rover, or I'm going to take the blue Land Rover, or the white car, which is referred to as the White Discovery. That's the extent of the names of my Land Rovers, just because sometimes they come and go, as they sometimes do. But as for my yellow Series 3 109, I don't think I'll be selling that anytime soon at all. Same with my Defender.
So tell us more about your weather vehicles. You have a yellow 109 Series 3?
Yep. So 1975 Land Rover Series 3, the 109-inch variant, and that is powered by a GM or Holden 202 red motor, which is a 3.3 litre straight six.
Was that original, or is that that was not original?
It is not. It's not original. Originally had the 2.6 Rover in it, and it was a very common conversion back in like the 70s through to the 80s to just chuck a Holden motor in it, just because of multiple reasons. People liked the power increase, and also the parts available for Holden engines was much higher than ordering British parts for the Rover 6. 2.6 was a bit harder to get your hands on and more expensive. Like, you could get these Holden engines in a crate, and people were making conversion kits just to bolt it all straight in. Super, super common. All my Series 3s have Holdens in them.
Nice. So what else?
And the other vehicles, yeah. My first ever Land Rover I bought, as I mentioned previously, but didn't say it was my first, was the Land Rover Defender 110. That's got the 300 TDI in it. When I bought that was in 2011. I bought that 2011.
What year was it?
That one was a 1994. Bought it.
Everyone here in North America is jealous because your first Land Rover was an actual 110 that we still can't get here in the U.S.
Yeah, like it was a. I'm really glad that I still have it. I've never considered selling it or anything like that, and I think wife agrees as well. She said you can't sell that car because like we did so many trips in that car when we first met around Tasmania. It's just an amazing vehicle. I learned very quickly that taking that vehicle to a mechanic is super expensive. So I think I went once, and after that I was just like, okay, we've got to learn do this stuff ourselves, and bought a manual and just cracked into it, really. Things needed fixing. I just learned and asked friends that knew what they were doing, because I had no idea at the time, being my first vehicle. Steep learning curve, but absolutely grateful that I've learned as much as I have now. There's nothing I'm not confident with doing on the vehicle at all. I can do the timing belt, the head, anything engine. Gearbox I'd like to learn more about, but it's like the saying goes, if it's not broken, don't touch it. Right. Not going to touch it until I need to.
A Series 3, you have a 110, anything else?
Yep, the one behind me, which is a 1961 or 67 Series 2A wagon, which is currently in pieces.
Isn't it a 1971?
I can't remember.
I think it is. I actually used to own the vehicle, John. Yeah, it's a 71. It's a 71, Damon. Anyway, continue.
Sorry, I've just confirmed it's February 71.
There you go. Damon, for some reason, I thought that was a background picture you had, just the way you're shimmering in the picture and the lighting. It almost looked like it was just a background you put up. Oh, it's actually there. You can touch it.
I can touch it. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I'm just in the shed.
So what's the state? Ambience. What's the state of that 71?
Oh, it's it's in pieces. There's just stuff absolutely everywhere. The doors are off. The guards are off.
And what's the plan?
I'm just restoring a very basic restoration, tackling the rust. Mainly the rust is the concern, and just a bit of engine work and potentially some gearbox work as well, just to get it back on the road. Because as Geoff mentioned just before, that he used to own it. He sold it to a friend down the road, or a mutual friend down the road, and they had it registered and everything, but I think they just neglected it and couldn't keep up with the maintenance that is required with a vehicle of this nature. And sadly, it was condemned to a paddock for a number of years, registration lapsed, and ultimately I was sick of looking at it in the paddock and went and offered to buy it back, and here it is in my shed in pieces.
You're keeping it going. It's better than it just sitting there wasting away. Yes.
Yeah, I think someone had to do it, and I was in a place to commit, so here I am.
Anything
in
else
the middle
in
of a restoration?
Anything else in the fleet to?
Look, there's nothing like, because at the family farm there's probably another 4 vehicles in a paddock.
And what's your daily? Do you have a daily driver? Is it a Land Rover or not a Land Rover?
It is.
Yeah.
It is a Land Rover. It's a 1998 Discovery One with a 300 TDI in it.
Excellent.
Very good condition. I'm very glad that I picked that one up quite cheap. It was about 4,000 Australian dollars when I bought it about 5 years ago.
Is it a stick?
For some reason. No, it's an automatic.
Okay.
Which is, I think it's quite nice having an automatic from just having a break from driving a manual.
Yes, it is.
And funny enough, like I when I bought that vehicle, it was probably 2 months after owning it. I actually blew up the automatic transmission torque converter. It just completely sheared the internals. So I had to go through that saga and pull everything out, and not know anything about automatic transmissions. Had to learn on the job, so they say, and replace that torque converter. And yeah, that was a great experience. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone because it's a pretty difficult job to do. Actually did it in the paddock at the farm, because that's where it got dropped off by the tow truck, because I unfortunately had to get it towed home. It just was not going anywhere. So that's fine now, all fixed and no hiccups, and it's a great daily, good on fuel, and quite comfortable compared to a Series Land Rover.
Definitely. It said you can't have just one Land Rover because you at least have one working.
Yeah.
Geoff, how about you? What other vehicles? You have we talked about a Series 261 that you paid $400 for. Anything else that is the Parente yours?
It is. They're ours, John. We share the love here.
Absolutely.
So, the Series fleet, we have a Eastern Division, which Damon's, and I own the Western Division. So, I started restoring the Series 2, and then I realised I needed a few other parts. Like I needed a root for it, just those little niceties. And so I thought, I'll buy another one for parts. And that just led me down a massive rabbit hole of getting even more Land Rovers. But I ended up starting up a little spare parts business, selling Land Rover spare parts, restoring bits. And through that, and through a fella that Damon got to know, I ended up picking up a 1951 80-inch Series 1 with the first of the 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engines. So I've got that.
Wow, that's impressive. No, we're pausing you on that one. A Series 1, an 80-inch Series 1 from 1951. So that would have been, that's only 3 years old. Land Rover's 3 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Do you have any background on that vehicle?
I do. The fella who I bought it off was Max, and he'd had it for 45 years. And for that 45 years, it had only travelled around on his 200-acre farm. It had never been registered for the road. Prior to that, it was with the RAC, or the RAA, I think you might call it over in the UK. So roadside assist. And it was actually a
AAA here.
AAA.
Yes.
Oh, AAA. Thank you, John. Yeah, AAA basically. And it worked at a service station in Hobart in Tasmania. And that service station is still there. So I thought that was quite cool.
That has really good provenance there. That's spectacular.
Oh, and it sat out in the paddock for 20 years. So the cows ate the seats, as they do. But at the same time, John, the cows rubbing up against the paintwork actually kept it in very good condition. The oil of the actual fur or hide of the cow basically was a bit like lanolin, and they just gave it a buff from time to time. So the paint's actually not too bad, and it's actually got a really rare quirk that Australian Land Rovers had at the time, and it's actually got a square plate on the, I think, the passenger side, no, the driver's side, which is the right-hand side, front guard, which would have had Land Rover actually written on it. So it's quite complete for its age.
I'm
And
sorry,
when I stripped the motor apart,
what's this thing on the driver's side? I'm sorry, the plate?
Oh, so for some reason, when Land Rovers were exported to Australia, and I can't recall all the details off the top of my head, John, but they had a special plate that was put on the front and back of the vehicle. And it was basically just Land Rover written in the same sort of font as on the badge, but just much larger to really denote that it is not a Jeep, it is a Land Rover. Okay. So anyway, it's still got those plates, which is really quite nice. And the other thing with it too, John, because it spent 45 years on a farm chasing the odd stray cattle, the brakes were completely flogged, but the motor still has the standard pistons in it. It's never been rebuilt. The bore's in great condition. So I'm just going to give it a light hone, put it back together and get it back on the road again. Fantastic. And I bought that one for $400 because no one wanted it.
So $400 is a sweet spot for you.
It is. Back then it was. Paid a bit more for later additions to the fleet. Yeah, so I got that. And then a friend of mine, George, who actually bought the Series Tour, we bought a quite rare, I think 1957 107-inch station wagon, Series 1 station wagon. And that is ex-hydroelectric commission. And the hydroelectric commission, just for those who don't, basically built these large dams, hydroelectric dams in Tasmania. And so the actual vehicle was used basically as like a personnel carrier to move people around. And that one too spent all its life on the farm and basically was used as a local bus to pick everyone up and take up to the local sawmill. So that's seen very little use too. I think it's only been around Tasmania once, and you can see where they actually put the boat on top of the roof and it just rubbed in through the paintwork. So I've got that, and then, yeah, there's the 1961 Land Rover Series 2, and then a few other ones after that.
Anything of more modern of note? Do you have any Defenders or Range Rovers? Or
no, I stop at 1990 for me. So I've got a 1975 Land Rover Series 3 88-inch, which we modified for the Canning stock group, film Road to Ruin, which you've watched. And then I decided, because my wife and I were starting a family, I needed to get a series vehicle that was also a station wagon. So I thought I'd get a real oddball and get a Land Rover Series 3 Stage 1, 109-inch, but get it with a Isuzu 4BD1 in it, because that's a very reliable motor. And then the new Land Rover that I own is a 1989 Land Rover Parenti FFR, which we've already mentioned. And when you buy one of those, you have to get the complete collection, John. So you get a number 5 trailer to go behind it. And that was built in 1966 in Mackay, originally towed by the Land Rover Series 2 and 2A, probably saw service in Vietnam, then the Gulf, and then they were only put out of service probably about 8 years ago. So that's a great little addition. They're designed to carry 20 jerry cans. So we use that for our filming in really remote areas, to carry our water jerrys, also diesel and petrol jerrys to keep the Landies running sweet.
Outstanding. Well, that I did see that trailer in one of the videos. I don't remember which, but that's really interesting. I like the background to that. Which is considered your daily, or do you have a daily?
They like to have breaks from time to time, as John. So it's whichever one's functioning.
Right.
I'm using my Land Rover Parenti at this stage, but usually the Series 2 is my daily driver. I just really enjoy driving that. Crash box first and second, keeps you on your toes. Armstrong steering. Yes, it is powered, but it's powered by you.
Right, exactly. And, you're saying all the right things.
That's it. Mm-hmm. No assisted brakes other than your foot going on that brake pedal. You've got direct control of whether you stop or not. That's great.
I like it. Yeah, that's I refer you back to our previous conversation about the other people around you. Having power assisted brakes is a great improvement in automotive technology that I do like.
Certainly is, John.
Especially here in Western Pennsylvania, where there's hills and curves roads follow the way that the Native Americans would have traveled, and which usually follows a valley or a creek bed or a river. So nothing's straight here, and nothing's flat.
No, and you would have quite a bit of black ice over there in the winter too to keep you sharp.
Yes, that too. Exactly. Yes, you are correct. Assuming we ever get winter again, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, so that's basically our fleet. Obviously, you've got to keep a good stock of spare parts. You can never have enough spare parts, John. And to say no to spare parts is ludicrous. Damon obviously has his parents' farm where there's a vast stockpile of parts there. I've got a substantial stockpile of parts over here. Between us and our good friends, we've got enough to keep the fleet running.
You both mentioned you have families and wives. Have you gotten them into being Land Rover people, or is there the odd Holden or Toyota in your family's fleet that you haven't mentioned already?
Oh, getting the skeletons out of the closet, John.
Exactly.
Look, I'll take one for the team here, Damon. I'll go first if you like.
Yep.
It's Land Rover inspired, John. So it's not completely wrong, but not completely right. My wife and I, we did a lot of traveling in WA in the Parenti, and we really love it. But when it came to buying her a new car, we looked at the Land Rover Defender, and I just felt, being in a remote area where we live, there was just too many electronics and stuff that might go wrong. I was always amazed at the Isuzu motor in the Parenti, so we decided and actually bought an Isuzu MUX. So inspired by the Parenti, and that's her sort of daily driver.
In full disclosure, most listeners already know this, though. I do have a 2013 Volkswagen Jetta, so that's...
Oh,
yes,
that's tasteful.
It's the station wagon. It's a sport wagon TDI with the 6-speed. It's wonderful to drive, actually. Yeah,
it's nice to dabble now and then with modern vehicles, John.
Yes, you are correct, sir. And I recently got a 06 Disco 3 LR3 here in North America, and have fallen in love with that. Let me tell you, I've fallen hard for that. That's a nice ride in Land Rover. Let me tell you.
Oh, it would be. You'd have heated seats in that too, John.
It does have heated seats, although the driver's side has a hot spot. So I turn it on for about 10 seconds, and then I turn it off. So there's a hot spot right on my left leg. Which is fine. It's fine. It heats up pretty quickly, so it's all good. It's nothing like the Series 3 or even the 110 driving that in the wintertime. It's a whole different experience.
Yes, it is.
Damon, do you wish to answer the previous question, or should we skip you?
No, my wife supports the Land Rover Bug that I have. She actually drove the Discovery one for probably about a year when she decided to sell her other car, and she didn't bother buying another one as of the time. But she borrowed my Discovery one, and I pulled the Defender 110 out for about a year. So she drove that for a year, and then we decided to buy a Mazda CX-9, which is what she has always wanted. She's a bit of a Mazda fan. That's probably more tailored just for the family car. Because we've got 2 kids now, so a bit more kid-friendly for getting them in and out of car seats and whatnot.
Yeah.
It was a bit difficult for her to get kids in and out of a bit higher vehicle,
right.
A bit more user-friendly for her. But yeah, she definitely she still drives it. She's actually taken it today just because she had to pick a few bigger items up. So she enjoys it. She understands.
That's good.
Great.
You have the support. There you go. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's it.
Good.
We actually met Zoe on a Land Rover trip, didn't we, Dane?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know her at the time, of course, but I met in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia, where Geoff is right now. And yeah, the rest is history, literally. So that's nearly 10 years ago now. And that was our very first Land Rover trip that Geoff and I embarked on.
How did that come about? You both were in Tasmania, I believe.
Yeah, so that was probably cutting into where Series actually began. Geoff and I both had 2 problems, or one each. Geoff needed some work after he finished his university degree in geology, and I needed a project to do for my final year of cinematography studies in Tasmania, and Geoff wanted to go to WA to go find some geo work, where there's an abundance of work at the time. And we just came up with the idea of, let's film it, the trip itself, going from Tassie to Western Australia, and what better vehicle to do it in than Geoff's Series 2 that he had restored. Yeah, the planning went ahead and it was just all lining up. We didn't really know what we were doing in terms of going from A to B from such a large distance across Australia in a classic Land Rover.
There wasn't the information back then, Damon, was there? Like today, where you can just hop on YouTube and go, oh, what does this place look like? And Wiki Camps, what's that? I think that had only just started. There wasn't really a lot of information, and I think our friend Keith was the only one who actually had driven the Nullarbor.
That's right. And
with Google Maps, you can figure out where there are gas stations, and you can get fuel and petrol and diesel and food and water.
That's right.
I mean, that basic level for transiting is very helpful.
It is.
Damon and I have been friends since childhood, and we've always had similar interests. And it just so happens that one of our interests is Land Rovers, and obviously nature in the bush. And basically, I had got to a point in my life, I'd gone to university, I'd worked in the trades a bit, come out the other side, and graduating as a geologist at the time, there was a massive downturn in the mining industry here in Australia. The worst downturn in living memory. So there literally wasn't any work. So I applied for jobs for a good couple of years. I even came over to your part of the world, John, over to America, and tried my way there, which didn't work out, came back. And then Tasmania, where I was living at the time, went into a big recession. There was high unemployment, and even just getting a regular job was quite tough. And so I realised that I'd never really know what financial stability was. I wouldn't really have an opportunity to own my own home. And so the only place that I knew where there was a lot of work going on, particularly in construction, was over in Western Australia. So I figured that I needed to get over there, but how would I do it? And that's where sort of Damon came into it. And what was your reason, Damon, for sort of coming on that trip?
Because I had the issue of not having a major project for my cinematography studies, and what better way to document a trip like that, just through going from A to B, so Tassie to Perth pretty much, and having that opportunity gave us the flexibility to produce a documentary that was pretty unique for the course I was doing. So I jumped on it pretty quick and didn't really have a plan, so to speak, for the documentary, but I think just documenting each day as it progressed until we got to Perth, we had a lot of content. Just gave us the opportunity to have something pretty unique, and I think it turned out pretty well for something that we did on like a first time documentary, and first time for both of us producing something.
Is that available on the Seriously Series channel?
It is. It's on our YouTube channel, and that's how the name came about, Seriously Series, John. Damon and I were talking over a couple of weeks about this. How would it work? What would we do? How much was it going to cost? I had no money. Damon was a student, had money either. So how would we make it work? So we said, we'll divvy up the fuel bill and the food, because that's the big cost, and we'll keep accommodation to a minimum. And I said to Damon, this is sounding great. It sounds like a great project we're going to do. We should give ourselves a name. Okay. And I said, sounds like all we're going to be doing is talking about Series Land Rover. Why don't we call ourselves Seriously Series? And the only thing we're doing is driving from Tasmania over to Western Australia. So we're going to be heading west. And so that's where the title came from, Seriously Series Heading West. And we had 6 weeks to get on the ferry from Tasmania to what we call the mainland, or the continent of Australia as a whole, where we'd get off in Melbourne. And so we used that 6 weeks to whip the Series 2 into shape. As I said, we didn't have any money, so we couldn't put fancy drawer systems in. We didn't have money for a roof rack. We knew that the distance between gas stations, service stations was 400 kilometres, so the Series 2 fuel tank wouldn't make it because it was remote areas. It would be very expensive. So Damon, through a contact at an army disposal store, got all these ex-German army jerry cans. We calculated enough fuel for 700 kilometres, so we could not have to fill up at every fuel stop, so we could dodge the more expensive ones. And then I found a roof rack on one of the old Land Rovers that I was wrecking, so we put a coat of paint on that. And then Damon had some old plyboard up at his parents' farm and made a platform back in Series 2. And that sort of put all that together and put a Facebook page up. And yeah, we just continued on from there.
And you now have 6 videos of that on your YouTube page at Seriously Series Heading West, correct?
That's correct.
It's like you did that 8 years ago at the time we're recording this. So I admit, that's not one I've watched yet. So I'll catch up. But that's the one that started everything.
That's the one that started everything. And we, as Damon said, we didn't really have a plan because we didn't really know. But the one thing we had discussed was we wanted to make a good documentary series. And for me, it wasn't so much about the Land Rover enthusiast, as wrong as that sounds to say. I knew we would get that particular person interested and intrigued. But it was about the person sitting next to them, their friend, their partner, their wife, whatever, who didn't have an interest in Land Rovers. How could we get them intrigued to watch the program? And having finished a 4-year degree in geology, I thought, let's talk about nature a bit. Let's talk about the geology, the geography, the history of the area that we're traveling through, really immerse the people who are watching it in the environment, because that's what owning a Land Rover is all about. The door seals don't work. So you feel the change in the climate. As you said before, John, in the middle of winter, the condensation builds up on the roof. So that
inside the windows,
behind your neck, and wakes you up.
Yes.
It's driver awareness, 1960 style.
In Australia, does the same thing happen to Defender owners as it does here in North America? Does your driving foot get wet?
Yes, it does.
I figured that was universal.
It's universal.
Yes, I figured.
It is. It is. Yeah, so we really wanted to immerse people in the journey, and heading west was such a big thing for us because, as Damon said, it was our first trip, but it was the first time that we put together these ideas and actually to see if it would work. And a lot of credit goes to Damon because he's the one who actually edited it and put it together. And it might seem a little bit dated now, but I think it really still holds up quite well. It was just such a life-changing trip. I had no work prospects here in Western Australia. I had no idea if I could actually get a job. I said to Damon, can we go to Kalgoorlie? Because I knew that was a mining town, but I'd never been there before. And rocked into Kalgoorlie. My phone didn't work. My laptop had failed. Got covered in shampoo somehow in my bag. So I just printed off my CV or resume and just went door knocking. There wasn't a lot of work around at the time for the role that I was looking for. And I'd nearly given up, but it was the last place that I went to and actually knocked on the door and had a chat to a wonderful fellow, Marcus. And that changed everything around. He had a job, an entry-level job that I ended up getting. The place that we stayed at here in Kalgoorlie is where Zoe, Damon's wife, was staying at the time. They became introduced. Things went from there. I ended up getting the job and coming back to Kalgoorlie, and then 3 months later, I met my now wife, Claire. So it's the trip that keeps on giving.
No, it sounds like Land Rovers have brought you together. See,
exactly.
The Land Rover is the through line here, sir.
That's it. You wouldn't get that with a Land Cruiser.
Oh, absolutely not. No, not at all. Not at all. No, they would. I don't know if a Land Cruiser person would actually get out of the vehicle.
But when we came to finishing that trip, it's a 3,000-mile drive. And we did that unaided. And it wasn't all rainbows, John. And I'll finish up here in a minute, Damon, and throw it over to you. We had the speedo fail, which didn't really matter because you just go 3 notches back on your hand throttle, and it's roughly around 50 miles an hour. We picked up some parts from a toy museum that had a heap of Land Rovers out the back. We scavenged parts off wrecks on Nullarbor. But we made it right across Australia. We had just enough fuel and just enough money to do. And for the first time in its life, the Land Rover drove down onto the beach and looked out to the Indian Ocean. And so after doing this incredible trip, Damon and I were, at least I was absolutely knackered, but it left us with this thirst of adventure, and it left us with wanting more and wanting to do something bigger, better, and seeing, can we actually make a go of this? Can we make a go of this passion and this drive that we have and somehow turn it into a profession?
I think you've done a marvelous job. Everything that the videos I've seen, and I need to catch up on your original one, but you guys do a great job. It's just I like the cinematography and the sweeping panoramas of the area is great. That's always neat to see. And I especially liked when you showed people how to get water out of, I don't know, there's water underground and you're digging like a meter down and all of a sudden water coming up. That was really cool. Hey, you could get fresh water. Look around your surroundings. Pay attention.
That's right. That's right.
See, don't drive a Land Cruiser because you actually will have to get out of your vehicle if you have a Land Rover. So.
That's right, because they don't break down, John. They just temporarily stop, as we know.
Yes, but, I like that line, by the way. That was a great line you had. I actually noted that down in my notes when I was watching about how the Land Rover temporarily stopped.
That's it. There's no need to swear, John. There's no need to swear. No need to use the term breakdown here. But after heading west, we went off and did our own thing for a bit. And Damon, you had a fantastic opportunity, didn't you, with the BBC?
Yeah, after heading west and submitting everything and passing all my schooling and whatnot for the film school, I had linked up with now a good friend and still my boss, a guy called Max, and he was also into cinematography and he had quite high-end equipment and brought me on as like a camera assistant. And he had been in the making of getting this film off the ground in Tasmania, and it was later and now known as David Attenborough's Tasmania. We spent a good 2 years filming that series in Tasmania and just filming all natural history stuff. And it was a great opportunity, and you can still watch it now. It's on BBC and ABC in Australia, but it's also on other various streaming sites. But it just having to work on something like that gave me a greater understanding of how the film world works behind the scenes and also doing the work on the ground. And I've tailored that for myself and brought it across to CentreSteer series, and hopefully it's evident in the specials that we do. You can see my natural history background coming through these films with the Land Rovers included. It was a great opportunity to join both those worlds to what we have here at CentreSteer series, joining the nature and the Land Rover world. So it's pretty special.
It's very much like a travel log. You can see that coming through from your kind of little bit of BBC background. And I want you to know you're the second BBC connection we have to this podcast. The very first was Tim Slesser of First Overland fame. We've talked to Tim on the podcast, and so he worked for the BBC ended up working for the BBC after First Overland.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I do like your travel log
incredible
feel.
Fella.
He is, absolutely. In many ways, without him and the other gentleman whose names all elude me at the moment, but for First Overland to give everybody an inspiration, I think, to do overlanding and traveling. But you guys do a great job with, if I hope travelogue is not a bad word for you, but that's how I see that, is you're not just showing the technical aspects of what the Land Rover's doing and the breakdowns, which can be part of the story, admittedly, but you're showing the landscape and what's around and where you are, and which causes me to go look at maps. I'm curious where you guys are. I'm always listening for where you're located, and I look it up on the map to find out exactly where you're located. So I enjoy your style.
Brilliant. No, that's nice to hear, John. And yeah, it's something that we've come to realize, or at least I have, is that with whatever we do, we've got different characters, and it's not characters in the sense of a drama series, but the wilderness or the bush, the environment is a character in its own right. And with his incredible skill set and background, really bring that to life, as you've already mentioned, John. And then the Land Rover, that's a character there. It gets moody. It has problems. And people love that.
Yes.
And it's something that it's it was very hard with Road to Ruin, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And it was something that Damon said to Claire, my wife, who came on the trip, even if we tell you to stop filming, don't listen to us, keep filming. And that's really brought about the raw and real side to what we do. So you see when I'm getting really annoyed at the Land Rover because the jolly bolt won't work, or it's broken down for the 10th time that day because we've got sand in the fuel. And then you'll see the great highs of when we actually achieve something too. And I think that resonates with everyone, no matter what vehicle you own, because an adventure is just that. There are so many unknowns. And then on top of that, we then put in, as I've talked about, my sort of background and Damon's interest in the environment, the geology, the geography, the history of the explorers that we might be retracing one of their expeditions. It means that you're getting what we feel to be, hopefully, a travel log, as you put it, John, but a very informative travel log, at the very least.
I now know how to look for water.
Exactly. In the outback.
In the outback.
You can survive there for months.
That's right.
On end, John.
Hopefully it's not water from a mining area where it's all contaminated, but that's another video. Take your pH tester with you.
That's right, John. Damon had this, as you said, incredible experience. I'd gone off and tried to work my way up the ranks into a geological role and wasn't having as much success as I would have liked. And so that sort of led me to the idea of let's do something bigger. And I was chatting to a friend of mine who I'd met here in Cal, Ben Broder, who owned a local four-wheel drive store. And yes, he was a Land Rover nut. He's a Land Rover nut too. And he had this big wall of maps, and one of them was of Western Australia. And he said, why don't you go and do the Canning Stock route? And I didn't know what that was. I said, what is it? He said, it's this track that starts in this little town called Wiluna, and then it goes for 1,100 miles across 4 deserts where there are no towns, no forms of civilization. And you basically end up in the northern province of Western Australia known as Kimberley. I thought, wow, that just sounds awesome. And no one had, as we knew at that stage, had really filmed it. I thought that just sounded like an incredible adventure. And probably me being a little bit too ambitious, like we're doing a new series, we need a new series Land Rover. Damon had access to this fantastic camera equipment. Why not go off and aim to film a series that could be shown on Netflix or online streaming service at the time? That's where sort of the idea of Road to Ruin came.
We want people to go watch it and see it for themselves. So it's in the title, Road to Ruin, but we're not going to give away the ending. But do you anticipate trying again, maybe in a different vehicle or at some point in the future?
Damon can probably answer that better than I can.
Yeah, the same vehicle. We've definitely been discussing very recently of tackling the trip again to redeem ourselves. Redemption of Road to Ruin.
Road to Ruin. Redemption. You got a name.
Yeah.
You got a name.
Thank you, John.
Done.
And that was a 75 Series 3, right? That was the vehicle you took on Road to Ruin?
Yeah.
You apparently got it done the day you left.
Yeah, we had a few issues, didn't we, Damon?
I haven't even left the driveway yet.
There's a little lesson learned, which is maybe test the vehicle for a week or two or take it on a off-road for a bit, a shorter drive, and then before commencing a larger journey.
Oh, definitely, John. Definitely worth taking it out for a run. But it's funny when you start filming stuff and there's a lot of moving parts. And one of the problems that we had was we'd worked very hard with Ben. He'd helped us get a sponsorship proposal together. We'd approached the likes of ARB. They came on board. Toyo Tires came on board. Expedition Centre or Front Runner, they came on board. And just trying to get the actual freight to reach Kalgoorlie so we could put it on the car just got delayed more and more. And we had some epic days of just trying to chuck all this stuff on literally before we left the Kalgoorlie itself. And then when we put everything in the car, we found the springs weren't heavy duty enough. So we had to cannibalize those out of the Series 2 to put them in so we could just drive down the road, John.
Okay. Yeah. And so a future attempt, a redemption is possibility maybe down the road?
It is at this stage, as Damon said, we've been talking about it quite a bit, and we're aiming for mid-2025 at this stage. We feel that we'll have the Series 3, the same Series 3, pretty much ready for that. And we're hoping that we should have hopefully significant funding to pay for it all, because these projects do cost money, as podcasts do too, John, you know.
That you are not wrong, sir.
And we'll hopefully have the Parenti as our support vehicle.
Ooh.
And whether or not we take a trailer, still up for debate.
Are there max tracks big enough for a Parenti?
There are. We don't generally use max tracks. We actually we're big fans of the canvas tarp. So we'll just lay that over the sand or put that underneath, and the vehicle will come out pretty good.
I'm sorry, why is that?
It distributes the downward footprint of the vehicle much better. Canvas obviously grips much better than sand, and you'll be able to drive out of it.
So a canvas tarp, not a vinyl or plastic one.
No, just good old canvas tarp. U.S. Army disposal stores will have them stacked up on the shelf, John.
That's a little tougher here in the U.S. these days. It's those vinyl plastic tarps are easy and cheap to get, but that makes sense to use. Canvas makes a lot more sense.
But we will be better prepared this time. Damon, you've been able to get the camera gear to be a bit more robust this time, haven't you?
Yeah, it just wasn't something foreseen to. Well, I should have known really initially on the first one to bring all this high-end cinema gear out to the middle of the desert was not really a likable experience with the sand and the dust. Luckily, we had Pelican cases to seal the equipment up. But lesson learnt, we've since downgraded in terms of size and usability with our camera gear to make it more robust and also user-friendly so everyone can pick up the camera or cameras and press record, because the cinema cameras, you need to actually literally start them up like a computer. You have to manually focus everything and exposure. It's just an absolute task, but the image quality is absolutely amazing. But the cameras nowadays, they can achieve a really good quality image. You can not really tell the difference between, unless you're using something like an anamorphic lens setup. The setup we've got now, I think, is quite smaller. It's a lot smaller, so we'll have less gear, less weight. So it's just really a good place, better place to be in for a production side of things for the camera department.
Back to the sand in the fuel, I was curious about that. Was that because you had sand in the fuel? Was that from the place that you had gotten the fuel, or did sand get into the tank as you were traveling? Did you ever figure that out?
We did. It was and is, sadly, we found out afterwards. It is a common thing to actually happen in this part of the world. Also, condensation in your fuel is another problem, particularly if fuel's been sitting around for a long period of time. So it just justifies, John, very much justifies that you always take a bottle of single malt whiskey, vodka, or white rum, and you empty that bottle into your Land Rover. You have a little bit at the end, and that will absorb all the condensation, and your Landy will run fine. But as for the sand, it was something that really crippled us. It blew our intended 2 weeks to do the stock route into 3.5 weeks. It took us many days to figure out what it actually was. It caused the fuel pump to jam, overheat, which meant that on a day-by-day basis, the vehicle might stop up to 6 times. We were only achieving maybe 60 kilometres a day, so you do the math, it's about 10 kilometres. It would stop, and then we would have to pull the carburettor apart to get the sand out of it, or we would have to pull the fuel pump apart, or we would have to get toilet paper and actually wet it and put it round the actual housing of the fuel pump, and that would cool it down and allow the valves to actually pop out of the housing, so then it could actually start up again. It was a real problem, and when we got towards the end of the trip, we were getting to the point where we were going to fill up and refresh with new fuel. We put our clean reserve fuel into the vehicle, and we got 150 kilometres that day, no issues at all. So the sand was definitely a problem. But it's a problem out here because we've got road trains, which are large tankers. They drive down these dusty roads and they have a breather valve on top. The petrol or diesel tanker is right at the back of this chain of tanker trailers or semi-trailers. and there's a change in the temperature, they'll actually inadvertently suck sand in and suck dust in to the actual fuel itself. And that's just what had happened. We just got a dodgy batch.
You could feel your frustration coming through the video of how frustrating that whole series of activities.
Oh, look, it was.
Breakdowns.
And the reason why it looks so good is because Damon's so good at editing. He can make anyone look good, John. But look, it was. And I probably didn't handle the pressure that well, to be honest, given our word to these sponsors and these companies that we were going to do this fleet it. And it weighs on you pretty heavily and everything's going wrong. And we put so much into this and we wanted it to succeed. We needed it to succeed. In the end, we just had to try and keep making our way as far as we could up the track. And reaching that point of realization of that, yeah, it was tough.
And as our listeners know, we'll have a link to not only Seriously Series, your YouTube channel, but also to where you can rent the Road to Ruin. I found it on Apple TV for $3.99 American.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
Sorry, I didn't buy it. I
And
just
we
rented it.
No, that's fine. As long as you watched it, that's the main thing, and you enjoyed it.
Oh, I did. As I said, you could feel the frustration coming through. One other question I had from that was, I was surprised to see camels in Australia. Is that, I guess that's typical and normal. I don't expect to hear of or see camels in Australia.
No, they're not native to Australia. They were introduced to Australia in 1872, and they played a pivotal role in sort of the last exploration phase here in Australia in the 1870s. They were really important in terms of transportation, the camel trains. Towns like Kalgoorlie and Coolgardie, their streets are pretty much probably 6 lanes wide, John. And the reason is you need that much room to turn a camel train around. And these camel trains would have probably up to 40 camels. And that's basically how they got all the supplies around Australia. And so over the years, I guess a few of them got cut loose and they ran off and got busy, and then they grew in numbers, and now we have herds of camels everywhere.
It's the same thing that happened to Land Rovers. Same thing. Some of them got cut off from the herd. They went off. They multiply on their own. Next thing, they're everywhere.
They're in every town.
They're in every town. No, that makes a lot of sense about camels. I appreciate you giving me the background on that. I like that kind of history, and it makes a lot of sense. Did Land Rovers or just large semis take over for the camel trains?
It was a slow progression, John. The railway network was incredibly inefficient, but slowly got there. Every state had a different gauge, which makes perfect sense, of course. It slowly connected all the towns. But it wasn't really until probably the late 1940s and 1950s when we started, as you say, seeing the development of the semi-trucks being more efficient, being faster, more durable, that we started seeing camels slowly fade away. The other problem is Australia at the time didn't actually have a road network prior to World War II. There's actually no road linking Australia from Perth and Western Australia right over to Sydney. The Nullarbor Plain was basically a featureless plain, and you would have to do a very perilous journey of travelling along the coast and going to the different soaks and rock holes, hoping that there was water there, and hopefully you would get to your destinations. With the threat of Japanese invasion after 1941, 1942, the government put in a directive to put a road across the Nullarbor Plain, and then also to put a railway that actually linked Adelaide to Port Darwin, the north and the south of the country, and a road to accompany that too.
Thanks to World War II that we got the interstate system here in the U.S. That's why we have all our major cities are connected with, we call them interstates, motorways is what they call them in the UK. There's required grading. They have to be 1% to 2% grade and other requirements they have to be these roads. But that sounds very similar. Of course, we screwed up trains here in the U.S., but that's another matter altogether. That's another podcast.
Traveling with trains with John. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, another Pittsburgh connection for you when it comes to trains. Westinghouse Air Brake started just down the road for me, thanks to George Westinghouse. That's the air brake, train air brake. Westinghouse Air Brake started in Wilmerding, Pennsylvania. The George Westinghouse Bridge is one of my favorite bridges of all time. Yes, I do have
George.
I have favorite bridges. Yeah, George was a really cool guy. He was.
Oh, definitely was.
Yes, but that's all started here in Pittsburgh. He was not a Pittsburgher, but Westinghouse Air Brake still exists. It's now called Wabtec. but it still exists all these years. Train air brake is fascinating.
Yes, it's fascinating how these roads and infrastructures form, John, like interstate. But for us, Road to Ruin was a tough trip. It took us a bit of time to form that inspiration again to actually do another trip. But that led us to do a few other things, didn't it, Damon?
Yes, I suppose after recovering from Road to Ruin, which was quite some time, we both went back to our homes, me and Tassie, Tasmania, and then Geoff just back to Kalgoorlie. And Geoff, being from Tasmania, was coming back to visit family now and then, and we decided, oh, let's try sneak a couple Land Rover trips in where we could just film them and just go show people where we grew up and the places that we see in Tasmania on the regular. We decided to call this series that we just have not really stopped doing the Edge of the Earth series, and it's just Geoff and myself really just going on backtracks and places that people and that would normally see on a postcard, so to speak. It was more like us focusing on going out and showing people what locals only really see in Tasmania, and using all the forestry or logging tracks that have been put in over the years and take you to the World Heritage areas and documenting that and the natural beauty that Tasmania has to present, and doing it in my Series 3 109, which is the Camino Gold one, and following the tales of that vehicle itself and how that's progressed over the years in the Edge of the Earth series is interesting as well.
That has a canvas top?
No, it goes between the wagon top, the solid wagon, which covers the whole tray, and then the ute cab, which is what I normally have on it because I use it regularly for carting hay or wood around the property. When Geoff comes over, I usually chuck the wagon top on so we can have all the camera gear and all our sleeping gear in there, somewhat watertight in the back. We've progressed to make those a regular thing that we do. And Geoff, you started something in Western Australia, didn't you, with your little trips in the goldfields?
Yeah, I did, because Damon and I were just having so much fun doing Edge of the Earth, and I thought, well, why don't I try and do a Western Australian version? And I found living here in the goldfields, it's a bit isolated, but there's just incredible history out here. And like Tassie, there's very few people that have been to these places. I started going off in the series too and just having a bit of a crack at filming it, hopefully taking people along on the journey, enjoying the journey. And there's a great book out here called The Golden Quest, and it's all about the prospectors that came out here trying to find gold. I head off, then I'll go and retrace the tracks of an explorer or prospector, or I'll hear about some stoke or waterhole out in the desert. I'll basically load the Series 2 up with jerry cans and bully beef and whatever else and head off for a few days. I started doing that, and then my other job as an exploration geologist, I have to do quite a bit of travelling. I started another little series called Back Out Bush. That's just taking people along for the ride to all these places that I have to go to. It's worked out quite well.
You're prolific, and you always seem to be publishing something, which is fantastic. That's good. Consistency is very important.
Oh, it definitely is. But while we did both of these series, that sort of led to our next big project, didn't it, Damon?
Yeah, which one's that, Geoff? Because we've got quite a few things planned in the future.
That led to Dust and Dreams, didn't it?
Oh, yes, Dust and Dreams. Sorry, John, we've just got so many things, projects up in the air at the moment, but Dust and Dreams, yeah, that was in the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, really, in Australia. And luckily for Geoff and I, Tasmania and Western Australia were pretty okay in terms of the COVID sense of things. So we were both allowed to travel to and from Tasmania to Western Australia for myself. So we decided to go do it was a big trip, actually. So going from Ayers Rock to the Great Australian Bight, down the bottom of Western Australia. So we had to drive there, which was a trip in itself, wasn't it, Geoff?
Yeah, it was, John. We camped our first night off the road. The first night's always great. Woke up in the morning, though. I'd basically brought up all the dinner that Damon had cooked the night before, which was wonderful. Didn't taste as nice second time round. And then Damon woke up and he couldn't see out of one of his eyes. And then Mike, who was with us, who never slept in a swag, he woke up looking 10 years younger. We hopped in the Series 3 and we drove about a mile down the road, and then it decided to act up a bit. And we found that after a couple of days, we diagnosed the problem, but our Lucas electric coil shock horror, which was brand new, failed. Basically was blowing out the ignition points, of which we had spares, but they were Lucas spares, so they were slightly different to the fuel miser German points that we had, so we couldn't really change them out. Damon would get in there with his one bionic eye that he had and scratch away at it with his pocket knife. That would get the Series 3 up and going again. So we were dealing with all of that, and then the changing state of the monster that was the COVID pandemic. We ended up getting stuck in the Northern Territory. That meant that we couldn't get back into Western Australia on the route that we'd actually travelled on. We were going to have to do a 3,000 mile or 5,000 kilometre detour to get back. So we started heading up to the north of Australia and up and around towards the Kimberley. But luckily, before we really embarked on that big trip to get back, our permits to allow us back into Western Australia on the route that we'd come into the Northern Territory, the Great Central Road, were granted, so we were able to turn around and get back on with the series itself.
Which journey is this called?
Dust and Dreams. And the name Dust and Dreams really came about, John, because of the characters of Central Australia or the Great Inland. They all share a lot of common elements. There's this romance of going out into a part of the world that very few people know of, to make their name or stake their fame. And one fella in particular, Harold Lassiter, he went out there to find a gold reef that perished or not. Depends on what theory and tale you believe. But supposedly there was a gold reef that had so much gold it would make El Dorado just look like a small gold nugget, basically. And then another fella, Ernest Giles, he went out there as a self-funded explorer to make his name, and that he did. But to go out there and to be exposed to that sort of remoteness, it has a certain romance lure to itself that draws people back time and time again. So that's the dust, I guess you could say. So the term or the title Dust and Dreams came out of that. And we're in the final stages of editing the film at the moment, hoping there'll be a release of that later this year, John. So we'll definitely have to catch up with you and talk more about that then.
So we got a nice little advanced preview of a coming Seriously Series video. That'd be great. That sounds interesting. What's the plan for that? How many episodes do you expect that to be?
We've edited it into a feature-length film, but we've then cut it down into a 4-part series, Damon. Is that right?
Yeah, currently 4-part series, roughly 20 minutes each, or hour 43 for the feature length. As at the moment, that always changes when you're in the edit, but that's very rough kind of timeline we're looking at.
And what vehicles did you take on this?
So for this trip, we took the Series 3 88-inch that we took on the Canning, and then we took it was the first big trip actually, with the Land Rover Parenti and number 5 trailer.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that'd be cool. I'm looking forward to seeing the Parenti in action.
Yeah.
Will there be Parenti in action?
Yes.
All right.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Plenty of that, John. Plenty of that.
Excellent.
Keep you on the edge of your seat and more.
Looking forward to that.
That's what it's all about.
One thing you said that I want to get clarification on, because I've heard this you mentioned it, the word while we're talking here, but also in a couple of your videos, and it doesn't translate well for me in American, is swag. You said you sleep in a swag. Is it you sleep in a swag? Is that, I'm assuming that's...
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's a great question, John. And you'll have to come over here and have the swag experience sometime. But basically, a swag is, I guess, an easy way of describing it. It's like a bedroll.
Okay.
Canvas bedroll. They've obviously got a bit fancier over the years. Now, the ones that we use have poles, they have a vinyl bottom on them, and they have your mattress, your sleeping bag. If you're fancy like me, you put a pillow in there and you just roll it up like a big bedroll and you just chuck it on the roof rack of your car or in the back.
Makes complete sense. I appreciate that. It makes a lot of sense. Okay, what a swag is. I figured I had to do something with sleeping. I didn't know if it meant sleeping in the back of the truck or sleeping in a truck or maybe on the front seats or something, but I figured there was some translation error there. So thank you for doing the translation for me.
No worries, John. But no, they're a very easy way of setting up your accommodation.
So maybe that's something you should add to your shorts, because you have a number of shorts on your website. Maybe a converting to, for us non-Australians, what some of the Australian words are.
I think that's a great idea, John. I think that's a great idea.
Are there other shorts and tips that maybe you would like to highlight or let folks know about? Because you don't just do the longer length journeys and overlanding.
No.
You do have some shorts there. I guess that's the bush mechanic and tips and tricks.
We do. We've set up the YouTube channel and our social media side of things. I also write for 4 different magazines and run a regular bush mechanics column. But we've set it up to try and make it almost like a Land Rover one-stop shop. And to the bush mechanics side of things, we've covered a few videos on that, Damon. And then obviously you've done some very in-depth, extensive videos on our Servicing Your 4x4 playlist that we've got on our channel too. That basically shows you everything of how to statically time your Series Land Rover up to how to strip down a Discovery One automatic transmission. There's fun there for the whole family, John. And we've also got our own little sort of landy chat or talk video where we talk to wonderful, like-minded individuals like yourself, John, get their good work out there and share the thrill of adventure, really. So there's plenty to be found with the content and videos that we've produced over the years, not only on YouTube, but Facebook, Instagram also. And we are regular journalists, writers, publications that come out in the wonderful magazine that is Classic Land Rover magazine too. You can find more about some serious adventure near you.
Excellent. That's great. That's great. You guys have inspired me. The videos you put out there. I should be getting out and doing more. So maybe, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Probably is. It's definitely a good thing, but that'd be cool. Should do that. Should get out more, travel.
You're in a fantastic part of the world for that, John. And we've got some great inspiration coming your way and for others in the future, Damon, don't we?
Oh, yeah, we've got plenty of ideas for everyone. I just can't wait to just start, really, like some of the plans that we have, not only in the longer trips, but I'm really looking forward to producing more videos on the Series 2A wagon that I've got. Just got a few kind of like different ways I want to present that in terms of the camera work that you probably wouldn't see on your normal workshop videos, which I'm really looking forward to that. And I suppose you've got your stage 1 restoration underway, and that being a little bit of a quirky vehicle, I'm sure that will draw in some interest of the stage 1 community, which is a community within the Land Rover community, which I've found out as well, which I find quite funny because they just came out of the woodwork with your recent video on the front axle, didn't they, Geoff?
Oh, they did. They came out in numbers and droves. We didn't foresee that they would be so active as they are, but it's great to see that a Land Rover with such a quirky front axle has such a dedicated following. So that's going to be great to cover that in our Servicing Your 4x4 episodes in the future. We've got some great adventures planned too. We're currently heading off on one next month in Tasmania, where we're crossing half the state and at the southernmost part of Tasmania. We've then got another one where in July this year I'll be pushing east of the Canning stock route on basically tracks that very few people have travelled on before, looking at the possibility of whether Harold Lassiter, this elusive prospector of the 1930s, could have escaped the Pateon range, this formidable mountain range, John, and actually dotted the the rock holes from the Pateon range right over to safety in the goldfields of Western Australia. And then next year, we're looking at pushing beyond the Australian continent, heading off to southern cousins, you could say, Damon, in New Zealand, and hopefully exploring some of the amazing tracks over there in, of course, some Series style Series Land Rovers, and then gearing up to conquer the Canning once more.
And I assume you're going to stick to anything in the last century that's Land Rover, I take it, is pretty much the cutoff.
Yeah, I think it is. Obviously, we'll see what the future brings if Land Rover or JLR contacts us and says, here's a new Defender, take it along with the Series Land Rovers, see if it can hold its own. We're going to be very open to that. The Series Land Rovers for us have always been so good because they're affordable. Certainly when we started, they were very affordable, as we've talked about. Parts are plenty. Doesn't matter what little town or settlement you go into, there's always a landy man or a landy girl there that has some parts on the fringes of town that might just get your Land Rover going again. We've found that even in the remotest tracks on the Canning stock route, we can apply some parts off an old 2A. They're just a great vehicle, and we'll certainly keep doing what we can with them in the future. Obviously, the trips that I've just mentioned and the adventures are really what we have planned here for in Australia and New Zealand. We do have another one coast to coast that we're working on for South Africa, crossing the continent of Africa laterally from the Indian Ocean over to the Atlantic Ocean via Angola and Namibia. But we are in negotiations with BBC with that one at the stage, and we hope that one will take off.
You did that journey. You've done that journey already?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay.
We've got it all planned out.
Mm-hmm.
It's in pre-production, but it may see one of our Australian Land Rovers go over to the other A continent, Africa.
There are several A continents, by the way.
Oh, there is two, and you're on one of them also.
There's three. Wait a minute. They're almost all A. They almost all of them have A in it. Nope, except for one.
Except Europe. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. There we go. Don't be so general, Geoff. We've got a producer friend of ours, Andre, in South Africa, so we would be going from the Indian Ocean on the South African coast, and then we would travel over, head a bit northwest, and go up through Namibia, Angola, and then come onto the Skeleton Coast on the Atlantic Ocean.
And is that the extent of it, or would you go a little further north?
That would be the extent of it, because the goal for that adventure is just to get from one ocean to the other, basically.
Understood. We need to connect you with an American who traveled in Africa back in the 90s. His name is George Bull, although he was more in the northern part of Africa. Has some interesting stories. I'll link you to them. I'll have to let you know about him in the podcast. Yes, he traveled back then. And of course, friends of the podcast are the Bells, Graham and Louisa. They are originally from South Africa and friends of the program. And they might be able to give you some assistance there, possibly. Very cool.
Thank you, John.
That's really cool and interesting stuff. Just fascinating. You guys are doing a great job and uniting the Land Rover community and doing neat Land Rover adventuring, off-roading. So keep up the good work. Where can folks find you on the great World Wide Web?
These days, if they type in Seriously Series, that will get them half the way there, John. And then they can immerse themselves in the adventure of Land Rovers more on our YouTube channel of the same name, Facebook page of the same name. Instagram, we are Seriously Series TV, and you can get some great little inspirational clips to get through your Land Rover day to make sure that you're going to get out on that big adventure on the weekend or quit your job and just drive out the door.
Just be like the Bells, quit your job and go travel the planet.
Yeah, why not? Why not, John?
And if you are, you could end up staying at my house.
Yeah, don't you do that, John, just yet, because we need the next podcast to come out. We've got to have the CentreSteer podcast.
All right.
Land Rover any other way.
Fair enough. All right. Although anyone traveling, if you're coming through the area and you need a place to stay, I'm near Pittsburgh, look me up. My place is open for Land Rover travelers. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for talking with us today on the podcast about Seriously Series. We'll have links, of course, in the show notes to where folks can find you, Instagram, Patreon, and the YouTube channel. I really enjoyed this conversation. For the rest of my CentreSteer panel couldn't join us. They had other things going on, so they missed out on a good conversation with you guys about what you're up to in your Land Rovers.
Thank you, John. It's been great, and I'm sure we'll catch up again for a chat later on down the track.
Thank you, and I look forward to catching up down the track.
On this World Land Rover Day of 2024, we hope you enjoyed show number 133. Thanks to our guests this month, Geoff Lewis and Damon Heather of Seriously Series. Be sure to check out their YouTube channel and their Patreon. We'll have all the links on the CentreSteer website and where you can watch their film, Road to Ruin, and get access to their YouTube channel. Also, thanks to Harold and Morgan. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Dixon wasn't able to join us this month. We're assuming he's somewhere over North America in Placid Lassie. We're just making it up. We have no idea what he's doing. And also thanks to the One True Pax for his continued production support. Thanks, Pax. We post a new podcast at the end of every month. Our website, CentreSteer.com, has all our shows. You can listen to those in the past, and also has links to all of the articles that we discussed in today's program. Those are on the show notes on the web. Each podcast has its own webpage. You can directly support the podcast at patreon.com/CentreSteer. You can buy a t-shirt, sticker, or even buy us a tea/brownwater. And visit our website for all those details. And we do greatly appreciate your support, and it does help us to continue producing the podcast. There are costs involved, and t-shirts and stickers and brown water all helps towards that effort. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover.
This has been episode 133 of the CentreSteer podcast. That is our 11th anniversary. We have gone to 11. And I'd like to take the opportunity in that moment to thank everyone that's been here, not only our current panel of people here, but those who have been on the show with us in the past that have gone their own way. I'd like to thank the many guests, interesting people that have come on the show and shared their stories with us. And most importantly, I'd like to thank all of our listeners, because without you guys, we would have nothing. And I've enjoyed the opportunity to meet several of the listeners in the past. And as we go forth into our 12th year, I'm looking forward to meeting more of our listeners at various events. To that end, I'd like to share a few words of wisdom that I've learned about meeting new people for the first time and how to get the most from that experience. It's a simple 4-step process. First, you start with a pleasant greeting. Then, of course, you state your name. Now, here's where it starts to get a little interesting. You provide a brief statement of relevance or what you might have in common with this person. And finally, your expectations or what you hope to gain from the encounter. Now, that all sounds very complicated, but it's not. And I'll give you an example. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. The system is simple, and it works. You should try it sometime. Thanks again for listening. You may now resume your important things. Is it my turn?
Yes, sir. It is your turn.
Never quite sure.